Oh. Okay, I think she's sending. Oh, we're sending one down to you. I think, Michaela. Yes.
Will you send one over for me?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully, we all have one. Okay. So one more thing I want to say, cooperating teachers, did everyone get a new handbook that we numbered because we realized that the handbooks were not numbered? So I just want to make sure everyone got one with the numbers. So the interns, you're going to have to kind of count with us because we were, like I said, realized late that it's numbered on our screen, but it wasn't numbered when it was printed off. So again, like I said, we realized that a little late, and your numbered ones will correlate with the PowerPoint. So as I said before when I introduced myself, I'm Mary Tankersley, the Clinical Education Director and in charge of the elementary intern placements, and this is Megan Sybil. And Megan is newer to the role. We hired her in January. She's been amazing to work with. We have a lot of the same working style where we're not procrastinators. We're kind of the opposite, a little annoying. We plan way in advance, but it's great because we can annoy each other. And so Megan, initially we thought, well, how should we split this up? And so since she was kind of working off my PowerPoint, I said, that's going to be really awkward. So she's just going to jump in when she feels like I haven't covered something completely, or she has something that's a little bit different for secondary. Because we do have a few things that are slightly different for secondary than are for elementary. And I've been working with interns now. This is my 18th year working with interns, which is amazing. My 10th year here full-time working in this capacity. Before that I was a supervisor. And I've learned so much. It changes constantly. I love my job. I love the challenges. I love seeing teachers grow. I love getting emails 3 years later that say, I still remember when you told us this, or you helped me with this. And the ones that we've had to sometimes have repeat an internship that probably had my face on their dartboard for a little while. I'll get an email 5 years later and said it was the right thing, I needed that, and that always makes us feel really good too. But the bottom line is we try to make it a partnership and a team between the supervisor, us, Megan, me, the intern. So it's not one of those things where sometimes I've had a cooperating teacher who's more familiar with the kind of old school way of doing internships, and we'll say, well, why don't you come by without them knowing sometime and try to catch them doing this, meaning something wrong. And I thought, well, I don't really want to catch them doing something wrong. I'm here to support them. I want to see them doing things well, and I can help, So that's more of our philosophy, is we're their coach, and we want to help them and bring them to where they can be and help them see their potential. So as I go through the handbook, I'm not going to read each page or go through each policy. Obviously, you can do that on your own time. What I want to do is just hit the highlights of these are the things that are really important, and here's where you can find it in your handbook. And then if you have any questions at the end, I'll be happy to go through that with you. We talked about some of these things. One more thing I want to just elaborate on that I didn't when I was opening up is we have 4 practicum experiences, and it gets a little confusing because the district calls final interns level 3, but that's what we would call 4. And so sometimes they'll say, are they level 3? And I say yes, and then they say, oh, well, they should have gone through this route, and I'll say, but no, they're a pre-intern, not a final intern, and it gets really confusing. So just so you know, our terminology that we use at the University of Tampa is our final internship is practicum 4 because they have 4 practicum or practica. So in practicum 1, it's primarily observation, working with small groups. It seems to be ever evolving, and we're having them do more and more hands-on in that practicum 1. So each semester I think it changes a little bit, where this group right here that you have, they might have done more observing, but now the current group is doing more where they're actually working with students and getting them out there sooner to do that. And their practicum 2, elementary education interns and English ed interns are the ones who take practicum 2. Starting this semester, it's going to be all of the interns taking a practicum 2. But again, the ones graduating, it would have been elementary ed and English ed majors. And those interns worked in an ESOL, a school with a high ESOL population, 2 mornings a week. And they were there working with those students, and the professor was on site with them, working with them there. In their practicum 3, they're there 2 mornings, 5 hours, 2 days a week, so a total of 10 hours a week. And they're doing a lot of whole group lessons. Their first time doing whole group lessons, planning, working with the teacher, etc. So they have had experience, obviously not enough for them to be ready yet for the classroom, so then we have the final internship. And we ask that if there are elementary ed interns in a classroom where they're departmentalizing and they're only doing math science or they're only doing reading language arts, that we will work with you on how we can make that happen where the students can go into other classrooms and see other subject areas, because we want them to be hireable. We want them to have the most experience they can. And if they've only taught math science, then an English, a language arts position comes open, and they're not often seen as the best candidate for that. So we just want to make sure that we're exposing them to everything. In the secondary ed, where that sometimes becomes a problem, is if we have a teacher that's teaching primarily AP classes or honors classes. Well, first year teachers, social science majors, you're going to get economics. And so maybe letting them see one period of economics or something that nobody really wants to teach, that's what your first year teachers are going to be teaching. So where they can just get some exposure to that, that can mean a couple of visits, observations, that can mean first period every day. It means different things depending on each individual situation. If you're a teacher that happens to have extra planning time for some reason, you're a department head or something like that, where the intern doesn't really need that extra planning time, then they can use that time to work with another group of students, with another teacher, and learn something valuable from them. So starting with the handbook, on page 2, I want to make the absence policy clear. When a student, there are really no vacation days for interns. It's just, we all did it. That's the way it rolls. So the interns, if they're going to be absent, then they need to call their supervisor or text or email, whatever's been arranged with their supervisor. They need to contact me, and they need to contact you. You need to be contacted, obviously, first and foremost, as early as possible, because especially if they're at the point where they're teaching all day, you need to know so that you can obviously make other arrangements. We also ask if they have any of your materials. So if they have any resources, they need to get them to the school somehow, whether that be a friend, whether they drive on their deathbed there, but somehow they have to get the materials to you. If they have anything at home that you'll need to teach that day, because we don't want your students to be negatively impacted by that. It's helpful if you ask the intern, if they don't send an email or something where you can see that everybody's been copied, if you just check with them, did you let the people at UT know, so that we don't wind up, we had a situation last semester where on the 6th absence, I received an email from a teacher saying, this is the 6th absence, I'm a little concerned now. Well, I hadn't heard about a single absence, so I was really concerned, because I thought I didn't even know they were absent, and we're in week 3 and there's 6 absences. I mean, it's something insane. So the supervisor was aware of only 2 of the absences. So again, if you see a problem or you feel like there's a situation that's developing, the sooner we know, like we talked about with communication, the better for us, because we need to know that's happening. Also, on that flip side with the interns, sometimes there's been a situation where the teachers had to be out a lot because they've had situations. We've had teachers where things have happened. Their mother passed away. They've become ill. They have a child that's sick. They're being pulled a lot for professional days, but it's helpful if the intern communicates with us those things too, especially if it's early in the internship, because we need to know, okay, do we need to maybe find additional support for that intern, and we can come out more often, etc. So all that communication, that's really important. And that leads nicely into let me say one more thing about absences, sorry. If there are any more than 2 absences throughout the internship, then those absences need to be made up at the end of the internship. So we kind of think it's probably likely that they'll be sick 2 times. We tell the interns, wash your hands a lot. There are a lot of germs. It's like little germ factories. And so try to wash your hands, try to be as present in the schools as often as possible, but sometimes you might have a runny nose and you have to go. So those kind of judgment calls need to be made. Starting on page 3, 4, and 5, just again are for you to look at later, the responsibilities of the internship team. Like, what are my responsibilities? What are the supervisors? What are the interns, cooperating teachers, and what we're expecting from each? They're somewhat broad, so they might apply to your situation, some might not apply. There obviously are more things that you can always do, creating a welcoming environment, like it sounds like you did. So those type of things obviously aren't listed, but are above and beyond kind of things. The lesson plans. This is where a lot of times we're telling them one thing and then the teachers are telling them something else. So we know, and I remember doing it when I was an intern, I'm sure the cooperating teachers, you did it when you were an intern, their lesson plans look a lot different than your lesson plans. And that's because they're just starting. So they really need to think about everything. They can't just put students in groups. They need to think about, how am I putting those students in groups? Why am I putting them in those groups? So their lesson plans will look more elaborate, will have more detail than your lesson plans. And I don't think that they'll be using these type of lesson plans when they're teaching, but this is the process that they really need to go through to make their lessons successful. So on page 6, if you look at, these are the things that every lesson that they write has to have in it. So they have to have objectives they have to have their materials listed, they have to have procedures, and they have to have an evaluation or assessment of their lesson. So those are kind of the bare bones of everything that they teach every time they get in front of the students. How detailed they are depends on the subject that they're teaching, depends on what topic they're doing that day, depends on the grade level. So there are a lot of variations. We look to the cooperating teacher to say, yeah, they were really prepared for that. This is a good amount of notes for this student. Each student needs a little bit more too. I know when I did my internship, I wrote down everything, but that was how I worked. I needed to read it and see it, and that helped me remember it. Other interns can write a little bit less and bullet points, and that works for them. So again, we don't have one specific way that might work for every intern. And if you look on page 69 through 77 at the back, these are just sample templates of daily lesson plans, and they can look like any variation of these. I had a student once who made a web and put the objective in the bottom and then had a web off and had procedures over here, materials over here. It looked really confusing to me, and I could never teach off of that, but it worked for her. So whatever method they want to use to assure that those things are hit, it doesn't matter to me. And that's one of the things that I would like them to try, some different methods, see what works best for them, because the same thing doesn't work. It doesn't work for everybody, the same thing. If you look on page 68, this is only for their formal observations. So for their formal observations, they'll need to use page 68. And on page 68, it has their formal lesson plan that when their or supervisor's coming to observe them, that's what they'll be using when their cooperating teacher or supervisor comes.
69. 69.
Oh, mine says 68. Is this numbered wrong? 69? Okay. It looks like this.
Oh, yeah, it's 69 on here.
69.
Oh, but mine says 68, so I have mine off for some reason. Okay, well, 69, this is the lesson plan format for the supervisors to use. Now, the supervisors will come to observe them 6 times. 2 of the 6 times will be to see guided reading lessons. 2 of the 6 times will be to see content-based reading lessons. Sorry, that's for elementary. Let me back up and say the guided reading and content-based are elementary only. For secondary, I'll let Megan talk about secondary. So 2 guided reading, 2 content reading. And by content reading, they could be teaching a science lesson, but using an article from a magazine or a textbook, some kind of reading that goes along with subject area. And then the other 2 are whatever they want it to be. The way that the observations, that's the word I'm looking for, the observations are scheduled is the intern will communicate with the supervisor about a time that will work, and they'll be communicating with you too. So they're the liaison between the supervisor and you. So they might say to you as the cooperating teacher, my supervisor would like to come visit on this day or this day, which day works best for you, what time, what class period would work. And sometimes the supervisors have oftentimes other things going on. It's a part-time job for them, so they might give them a window and say, I really need to come first, second, or third period on this day, and we try to make that work whenever we can. But if it's ever a problem, you just need to let the intern know that's just not going to work, and we'll try to be as flexible as possible. But we try to take that off the cooperating teacher's plate a little bit and make it more of the intern's responsibility to sort of coordinate the timing. But you should always be aware when the supervisor's coming as the cooperating teacher, and so should the intern. They'll know when they're coming to do a formal lesson and be prepared. The lesson plan does need to be submitted to the supervisor in advance so that the supervisor can give feedback. Often the supervisor will give more general feedback if they see something that's glaring or looks like it's going to take way longer than you're thinking it's going to, but they often don't give specific feedback, because what we were having happen with that was a supervisor would say, I think maybe this should be taught this way, and that was the opposite of what the cooperating teacher was saying. And we feel like the cooperating teacher is your students in your classroom, and so we don't get involved oftentimes unless we see something that's kind of, like I said, a big glaring mistake. Do you want to add anything about the...
Everything would be the same, except for with secondary, there'll be 4 visits from the supervisor per semester within the content area taught. So that would not be including an elective course.
Right, which is, and I'll try to cover the distinction in the next one too. The reason why elementary interns have 6 and secondary have 4, because the elementary interns get a reading endorsement, and so 2 of their observations kind of fall under the umbrella of the reading practicum that they're taking simultaneously with the final internship practicum. So that's why they have additional visits, and that's why their teacher work sample, which I'm about to get to next, is a little bit more stringent as far as what the topic of their teacher work sample. So on page 9, they have a teacher work sample, which is a unit. And for my students that are following along without a numbered handbook, just so you know, we started numbering on the first page of content, like not the title page or the letter. So on page 9 is information about the teacher work sample. The teacher work sample is a unit where we pre-assess students, and then instruction is delivered based on student needs, and then you post-assess students and calculate learning growth or learning gains. That is the very brief synopsis. As you can see how many pages that it takes, there's a lot more detail to that, but that's the general overview. It is something that the students will learn about in their seminar, so the students will become very familiar with what they're supposed to do in the teacher work sample, and then they'll work with their supervisors on this. The main role that you have as a cooperating teacher is just more of a supportive role of the lessons that are part of the unit, but you're not grading the unit. You don't have to worry about necessarily being a big part of the teacher work sample, but obviously they'll need your guidance about the lessons. For elementary ed, it has to be a reading group, and they work with a small reading group, and it's usually your struggling readers that they're going to work with. And so they'll be assessing them. For elementary ed, it's going to be your students that are in the lower of the guided reading groups that will be used for their teacher work sample. And in secondary, they don't have to do it on reading. There's pretty much given free rein, right, with whatever topic they want to do.
It's your topic within your content, the implementation of backwards design.
So, right. And by the way, please stop me if you have any questions. If I'm going too fast. I know I talk really fast. And the reading endorsement on page 10, there's a little bit of elaboration just about the reading endorsement. But again, that's primarily, or not primarily, but only for elementary education majors. On page 24, there's happy topic and not so happy topic. So early release from an internship, we're always asked this question. So interns can be, within the state guidelines, interns are required to do a 10-week internship. We do a 14-week internship that correlates with our semester, as does every university that has an education program. But if they are excelling and you feel like they can move along at a faster pace and there's a position open and available waiting for them, then they can be released at 10 weeks. And that doesn't mean that the interns are supposed to be out looking for positions and trying to find positions to release at 10 weeks. That's not what that means at all. That typically, the way these come about is there might be a teacher at your school who's going on maternity leave, and the principal approaches you and says, we'd love for that intern to go into the maternity leave position, and they can be available for that at 10 weeks. If, again, they have met all of the requirements. Usually we want to know about that in advance so we can accelerate everything that needs to be done and make sure that they're finished with their teacher work sample and that they've shown mastery in all areas. And so as soon as we can be notified about a situation like that is helpful to us. And again, like I said, this isn't something that they should be searching for. It's something that often we get phone calls about, could we use this intern and release them at this time. The termination part is never a fun topic, but we do have to review it just in case. I'm hoping this won't apply to anybody in here. There are several reasons why a final internship would be terminated. We don't like to ever do that unless we feel like at the University of Tampa we've done everything that we can, the cooperating teacher has done everything that they can to make this work for the intern. But some reasons, if you look at the bottom of page 24, that this is from the Hillsborough County District when we sign our contracts with the interns. If they exhibit unprofessional behavior, insubordination, failure to give proper notices of absences, excessive tardiness or absences, and failure to meet the requirements of internships as determined by the supervising teacher or cooperating teacher. The bottom line is we know that your students are what is most important in this situation, and we don't want them to ever suffer or not move at the pace that they're supposed to be moving because of our interns. And so if they're doing something that is not allowing the students to learn at the pace that they need to learn or allowing the students to learn in the environment that they need to learn, then we need to have some major interventions, which we will, and we'll come out and remediate and we'll work with them and try to come up with a remediation plan. But if we've done all of those things and it's still not working, as the cooperating teacher, you do reserve the right to say, this isn't going to work out this semester, and then we handle it from there. And if something takes place on the University of Tampa campus or we're seeing something, then we'll call them in and kind of say the same thing, like these are the things that you need to do and here's how we'll help and support. Again, that's been very rare situations, only in insubordination, I would say, where we will come in and take the intern without any type of let's work on this, let's really meet as a team, how can we support them, what interventions can we do, and all of that. Kind of just like with your students, you're not going to hold anyone back unless you've done everything that you could possibly do. Anyone have any questions about that? Hopefully, again, it won't be any situation that any of you are in, but just in case. On page 25 to 28, this is, again, I feel like going to be one of those situations where it's open-ended to a certain degree. We have a traditional internship model where the intern slowly and gradually takes over. It is probably, those cooperating teachers in the room, is probably the model that was used on you. It's when you were teaching, and it was the way I know that the internship was supposed to go when I did my internship. When I did my final internship, the teacher after week 1 put all of the manuals, because it was a self-contained elementary classroom, on my desk, because she had a little desk set up for me, and said, okay, you start Monday. And I said, oh great, what subject am I starting with? And she said, everything. And I said, everything? She said, everything. And then she was pretty much gone. And she's like, I'll be in the library, and here you go. And I did not know what I was doing, and I learned a lot by mistakes, but it wasn't until my supervisor came in unannounced, just coming by to say hi, that I basically broke down and started crying and said, I have no idea what I'm doing. My teacher's never here, I'm not giving any feedback, and I never want a situation like that for my students. So the traditional model is supposed to be a gradual takeover where they might be taking over one period or one subject each week, and then they hold on to them for a minimum of 4 weeks, and then it transitions back. We're still supportive of that model. The only change would be that we really still would like to see the cooperating teacher involved in the classroom and assisting, modeling. If the student happens to do something that you feel like there was a better way to do that, then you could model for them the next period. Let me show you how that can be done a little bit better, and they can sit back, when you have the class change, and watch the next period. Other than that change, is probably pretty similar to what a lot of you went through. But there's some new research that's very supportive of a co-teaching model. And when I first heard about it, I was very against it, and I thought, how are they going to ever be able to teach on their own if they're, and that's kind of the criticism that you'll hear or you'll think at first. But I have some information and I'll send it to you electronically too, that's come out of UVA. They've done a lot of work in the Curry School of Education there, and they've been on the forefront of the co-teaching model, so they've been doing it for years. And and like I said, I'll send you some videos that were shared with me from UVA. There's some cooperating teachers talking about how I didn't think this was going to work, and it really did work well, giving some advice and just giving more information about some different models. But on page 26, there are some different, and 27 even, different models. If you decide, and this is a conversation I would love for you to have with your intern and decide what would work best for what you teach and your classroom environment. But in a co-teaching model that would probably be in most people's comfort zone would be where the cooperating teacher was the lead teacher, the intern is circulating, assisting, but part of the teaching of the lesson, and then it transitions. So it's the intern now taking the lead role and the cooperating teacher doing more of kind of the circulating, assisting, jumping in every once in a while. But what we don't want to see happen is the intern just becoming an assistant for the entire internship, and you write the lesson plans and you teach, and they just kind of stand around and circulate, because that's not really true co-teaching. They should be involved in the co-planning, and they should know what's going to be taught and what are we doing and how are we doing this. And if in a perfect world, it would look where an observer would come in and wouldn't know who the lead teacher was, because they're both just kind of bouncing off each other and teaching. I know that's really hard to make work, and in a short period of time to get that flow is really hard. So we'll just aim for the best of that situation. So that is also an option on page 26. It kind of elaborates the one teach, one assist. But then there's also parallel teaching that you can try. And we're happy if you want to try with one group of students one thing and then something different with another group of students. So for example, if you have in one of your class periods a group that's very diverse in their knowledge base, so you have one that kind of really what you would consider the lower students and the ones that are the higher students, you could parallel teach where you each take a group. And well, I'll take this group and teach at the front of the room, you take this group and teach at the back of the room. And that could even be something on a day-to-day basis, like we're going to try that tomorrow because that will work for this lesson. But next week we're going to go back to one teach, one assist, or with one group. So we're very flexible on however you feel like the interns can get the best experience, your students can gain the most information from. All of that will support whichever situation you find best. The interns will have to turn in a transition plan that's found in their syllabus, and we'll be talking to them about that today after this meeting. And that just is an outline of what your plan is, because we like to see what the plan is, and that might be in figuratively in pencil, or where you might switch it. You might try it for 3 weeks and decide this isn't working, we need to do this. Or the intern might start teaching and you realize, I don't think they were ready to take over this much yet, so we're gonna slow it down, or vice versa. Like they're ready to keep going, we're gonna speed up the pace. So it's more just an outline in general, give us an idea of what they're supposed to be doing, and it also can give the intern a good guide to what they should be expected to do each week and what their expectations are. It really helps with them. On page 63, I hope it's 63 in yours, because like I said, somehow I'm off now of your numbers. It should say educator disposition form. Am I back on track with the right page? Okay, good. So this form is a form that we use at the University of Tampa. We have some professors that develop this form, and it's throughout our coursework at the University of Tampa. We complete dispositions on the students, and again, a lot of the research will show that that's a big factor. There's a student's disposition in their success in the teaching field, and so we're trying to target right away, early on in their education program, if we have students that have weak dispositions, and how can we work with them, and how can we work to improve them. And so if you're wondering what am I meaning by dispositions, they're listed on 63 and 64. It's communication skills and professionalism and attitude. Do they have a growth mindset? All of those things are kind of positive attitudes, taking initiative. All of those are rated on this scale. Now the supervisors will be completing one of these on the interns, and there'll be faculty that's completing them. We don't ask the teachers to do this unless they feel like this is a problem area for one of the students or a weakness. So we want you to be familiar with this form, because if you're seeing one of the dispositional type issues, like their teaching is great, but we really need to work on an attitude issue, or we really need to work on the communication, the way they communicate with the parents or with the students, then that's when we would ask if you complete a disposition form to give us some information so that we can work with the students on that. We can help them improve in that area so that it doesn't become something that hinders them when they're in the professional field. So again, that's a form that's not mandatory for you, just there for your use. And then on page 51, I think that many of you will be happy with this if you've had interns in the past. The 51 is the new evaluation forms that we're using with our interns. In the past, we had our university intern forms that we had to use that were somewhat dictated by the state of what we needed to evaluate the students on. And it looked completely different from the evaluation forms that were being used in the classroom. So different than the Danielson evaluation form that's being used on current cooperating teachers. So then we tried to help our interns. We asked the teachers to do both, so that they were familiar with what was going on in Hillsborough County, because a lot of them do wind up staying and teaching here, and then we still had the ones for the state. Well, the nice part is that the state has now said that they want, and by the state I'm talking about the Department of Education, they want the interns being evaluated on whatever system's being used in the county where they're interning. So that was kind of like, wow, this is wonderful. Now we can just ask the teachers to focus on one thing instead of being all over the place. So we're happy that this will be a new way of evaluating the students. The students are very familiar with this form, and we're going to continue to work on keeping them updated with it and helping them as they go through their internship of what they should be focusing on. But if you look on page 51, this will explain, and you have these evaluations in your folders that were given to you, your cooperating teacher folders. We're going to ask you to complete these as both formative assessment and as a summative assessment. So if you look at on page 51 has the directions, which again, I know you can read on your own. On page 52, at the top, you'll see that we're going to be doing these at week 3, 7, 10, and 14. So 4 times throughout the semester, we'll ask you to evaluate your student on not necessarily one particular lesson, although if you're more comfortable with doing it on one specific lesson and using that as a springboard, that's fine. But it's more their overall performance for those 3 weeks, for those since the last time you evaluated them, how have they grown in this area? Because you're seeing a lot more than one lesson. You're seeing a lot of lessons. We have this part, the exemplary, shaded out on purpose because we have a lot of perfectionists of our interns, and I'm a perfectionist, so I totally get it, where they really want to be in that exemplary, and if they're not, then it was a bad evaluation, and that's all they can see, so I didn't reach that. So we have this shaded out because Charlotte Danielson, and for the interns who created this model, says that first-year teachers will be hovering and progressing and branching over, and sometimes have a day or a piece that's in accomplished, and they'll kind of float in and out of accomplished. But really progressing is what we're seeing first year teachers. So if you're an intern and you're at an accomplished level, then wow, you're doing wonderful. And we're aiming for exemplary, but we shaded it in because really it's going to be near impossible for an intern to be at the exemplary level if you take away all the factors that you've put in place for them. So all the support that you've given them possibly in a lesson, you might see some of that. So for the interns, again, if you can focus on that accomplished level, then that's fantastic. And by the end, the interns will need, in order to successfully complete the internship, will need to be in progressing or accomplished in each area. Of course, if they're an exemplary, then you can use that area, but like I said, progressing and accomplished is a great goal for them. If they have any requires action at the end of the internship, then they will need to extend their internship to demonstrate at the level of accomplished or progressing. So again, the dates that you complete those are on 3, 7, 10, and 4, and 14. Something different that we're also adding this semester is the supervisor is going to come at week 7 at the midterm, or as close to week 7 as possible, and have a 3-way conference with the intern, the supervisor, and the cooperating teacher. And going to complete this almost together, like as a conversation with the intern. The cooperating teacher will have one, the supervisor will have one. They don't need to necessarily mark the same score on each one, but have a conversation about those. That would lead the midterm conversation of how do we improve from here. And so that conference will be based on your availability during your planning period, before school, after school. Again, that will be coordinated with the intern and the supervisor and you. And again, that's something new this semester that we're trying, and I think it's going to be really beneficial, but that's something that we're working through as far as the scheduling. So you all will be our guinea pigs for that. And then on page 61 and 62, this is also something new that we're trying. In the past, we had a feedback form for the cooperating teachers. It was a notebook like this, and they could keep notes, and it was open-ended notes, like you did really well in this area, let's work on this for week 2. But we decided it would be more helpful for the interns if there was a focus. So what we did was we took what the state considers to be things that they are looking to see interns doing. These are the umbrella categories. At the end of each week, and if Fridays are kind of one of those days where everybody's tired, we're finished, we want to go home at the end of the day, you can make it on a Thursday, that's fine. But towards the end of the week, if you'd sit down each week with the intern and just give them notes, and this form you have in your folder also, or actually I think the interns have it. The interns have a packet, not the cooperating teachers. But the intern, on whatever day you're going to meet, if you would just have a mini conference with them and say, here's what you did well this week. Here are the things that we want to work on improving this week. Here is how you differentiated. If you didn't differentiate, maybe that's something we need to work on for next week. So these are all talking topics each week. You might not get to necessarily give feedback on every single thing every single week, but as many as possible would be ideal. And then the intern's responsibility is to complete the back side of that, which is page 62, where they reflect on what feedback you've given them, and they write their reflection, and then they send that to their supervisors so that their supervisors can read their weekly reflection. So interns, instead of doing the weekly reflection that you did last year or last semester, this would be your weekly reflection that you submit to your supervisor. And that can be scanned and emailed to them. You can take a picture and email it to them, but you get that to them instead of having to do 2 things, because we thought we don't want